There have been quite a number of interesting, curious findings about this remarkable place. Lying in the eastern part of Africa, between the equator and the Tropic of Cancer, in a region known as the Horn of Africa, the origin of Ethiopia happens to be largely the origin of us all. Nelson Mandela once said,
"Ethiopia always has a special place in my imagination, and the prospect of visiting Ethiopia attracted me more strongly than a trip to France, England, and America combined. I felt I would be visiting my own Genesis, unearthing the roots of what made me an African."
This is how truly old this place called Ethiopia is, which brings about us using the term the mystery giant for it. Ethiopia was home to the most ancient kingdom in Africa, one of the first monarchies in the world. It is the sole African country to possess an alphabet more than 2,000 years old. It is the only country on the continent to have maintained independence in the face of European colonizers. However, here's the very nucleus of this video. Hidden within the Ethiopian borders lies a controversial and little-known story that has captivated scholars and historians for centuries. This is the story of the Ethiopian Bible, a sacred text that has been banned and suppressed by various rulers and religious authorities throughout history, but very actively used in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church until today. The region, Ethiopia, was home to some of the earliest known civilizations in Africa, including the Kingdom of Dumt and the Kingdom of Aksum. One of the most important periods in Ethiopia's history was the rise of the Kingdom of Aksum, which emerged around the 1st century AD. Aksum was a powerful and influential kingdom that controlled much of the Horn of Africa and traded with civilizations as far away as Rome and India. The kingdom was known for its advanced architecture, including the famous obelisks of Aksum, as well as its adoption of Christianity as the state religion in the 4th century AD. And then, in the 7th century, Ethiopia faced invasions from Islamic forces, which led to the decline of the Kingdom of Aksum. However, the Christian Kingdom of Aksum was eventually replaced by the Zagwe dynasty, which ruled Ethiopia from the 12th to the 13th centuries. The Zagwe dynasty is known for its rock-hewn churches in Lalibela, which are still considered some of the most impressive architectural achievements in Africa. In the 13th century, the Solomonic dynasty, claiming descent from the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, rose to power in Ethiopia. The Solomonist dynasty, also known as the Solomonic dynasty, is the ruling imperial house of Ethiopia. It traces its roots back to the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, who is believed to have been from the region that is now Ethiopia. These, in fact, are some of the stories found in the Ethiopian Bible which they would rather ban and declare illegal than let you know your history and the whole truth the way it is. According to the Western Bible, the Queen of Sheba had visited the King Solomon from Ethiopia because of the king's renowned wisdom far and near. She had visited with the aim of also seeking wise counsels from the king. With her came many gifts. It was stated precisely in 1 Kings chapter 10 that the Queen of Sheba is a seeker of truth and wisdom, and she has heard that King Solomon of Israel is a very wise man. She travels on a camel to Jerusalem to meet with the king and test his knowledge with hard questions and riddles. Solomon answered all her riddles correctly, and the foreign queen gifted the Israelite king with large quantities of gold, spices, and precious stones. It was in fact stated that never again were there so many spices brought in as those that the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. This the Western Bible had readily told us, but what it sure didn't tell us, which the Ethiopian Bible, the Kebra Nagast, reveals, is, during the queen's visit in Jerusalem, she and the king had a son together, his name, Menelik. It further says that Menelik didn't stay with the father. Queen Sheba had taken the boy back to Ethiopia and made him the first emperor. Menelik once. In 2012, experts looked at the genetic makeup of many Ethiopians and found some evidence to support the queen's journey to Jerusalem and birth there. The Solomonic dynasty ruled Ethiopia for over 700 years, establishing the Ethiopian Empire and expanding its territory through conquest and diplomacy. The empire reached its height under Emperor Menelik II, who defeated the Italians at the Battle of Adwa in 1896. making Ethiopia the only African nation to successfully resist European colonization. Let's now look closer into the history of that revered holy book of theirs with lots of controversial opinions tied around it, the Ethiopian or ABA Bible.
This is the oldest book in Ethiopia.
No more painting, only writing, damaged.
Okay.
Original.
This is the
The
original.
original, Mary.
Ethiopia has some of the oldest scrolls of Israel. Unlike the King James Bible, which contains 66 books, the Ethiopic Bible comprises a total of 88 books and includes some writings that were rejected or lost by other churches. There are certain Ethiopian tribes who have been worshipping the God of Israel for over 3,500 years. But this does not mean that all Ethiopians worship the God of Israel. A great many Ethiopian Hamite populations are split Orthodox, Muslim, Protestant, etc. in worship. But Christianity was introduced to Ethiopia in the 4th century, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, called Tewahedo in Ethiopia, is one of the oldest organized Christian bodies in the world. You can say one thing for sure: Ethiopia is one of the oldest civilizations in the world today, being first settled by Ham's sons after the flood of Noah. They also had all the scrolls of the Old and New Testament plus scrolls never seen before in the Gentile Christian Bibles. What is even more interesting is that Ethiopians had these scrolls long before Christianity first arrived in their society in the 4th century. In other words, Christianity was not a religion given to them like most nations. Christianity was already present in Ethiopia, as the country has been a Christian nation since the 4th century. Many say some tribes in Ethiopia have been worshipping the God of Israel for thousands of years, not to mention that some of the true descendants of the lost tribes of Israel are still living in Africa and Ethiopia. Even the so-called Jews who live in Israel today cannot deny their claim, when they have more geological proof of their heritage to Israel than the European Jews do, and they can prove it. Throughout the centuries, Ethiopia has maintained a deep and abiding faith in Christianity. This faith is rooted in the Ethiopian Bible, also known as the Ethiopian Orthodox Church Canon, a collection of religious texts used by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. It includes the books of the Old Testament, as well as several additional books not found in the traditional Western Christian Bible. These additional books are known as the deuterocanonical, or apocryphal books, and are considered canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Ethiopian Bible is written in Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language, and also has a long history that has been passed down through the generations.
In the process of social incorporation and identity formation, indigenous learning plays a crucial role as a transmitter of social rules and values. Until the introduction of modern education towards the end of the 19th century, the Ethiopian Church was responsible for literacy, social values, and identity.
The earliest evidence of Christianity in Ethiopia dates back to the 4th century, when the Ethiopian king, Ezana, converted to Christianity. This conversion was followed by a period of growth in Christianity throughout the region. During this period, the early church fathers translated the Bible into the Ge'ez language, allowing the Ethiopian people to read and study the Bible in their own language. The translation of the Bible was not completed until the 8th century, when the monk Abba Pantaleon completed the translation from Greek into Ge'ez. The Bible was then divided into 2 books. The larger book, known as the Kebra Nagast, contains the Old Testament, and the smaller book, known as the Fetha Nagast, contains the New Testament. The Ethiopian Bible has gone through several revisions over the centuries. In 1630, the Bible was revised for the first time in over 500 years. This revision was undertaken by the scholar ABA Bari, who was tasked by the Emperor Johannes III with updating the translation. ABA Bari's revision was the first major revision of the Bible since its original translation, and it helped to bring the Bible up to date with modern language and understanding. Interestingly, the Ethiopian Bible has played an important role in the history of Ethiopia and its people. It has been a source of guidance and comfort for generations of Ethiopians, and it remains a vital part of their spiritual and cultural identity. It also continues to be a source of strength and inspiration for the Ethiopian people. Now let's get to why the much revered Bible was banned. The Ethiopian Bible was banned for several reasons, primarily by European colonizers and missionaries during the 19th and 20th centuries. One of these reasons is as a result of doctrinal differences. During the colonial period, European missionaries and scholars began to study and translate the Ethiopian Bible, which contained texts that were not included in the traditional Christian canon. As they became more familiar with the Ethiopian Bible, they began to question its authenticity and its theological implications. The Ethiopian Bible, as we earlier stated, contains several books that are not found in the Protestant or Catholic Bibles, known as the Apocrypha or Deuterocanonical books. These books were considered non-canonical by European Christian denominations. Some European scholars argued that the texts in the Ethiopian Bible were not consistent with mainstream Christian beliefs and should not be considered part of the biblical canon. European colonial powers, such as Italy during its occupation of Ethiopia in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, sought to suppress the Ethiopian Bible and promote their own versions of Christianity. They viewed the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and its sacred texts as obstacles to their efforts to control and Christianize the Ethiopian population. The European missionaries and scholars dismissed the Ethiopian Bible as inferior to the Bible used by Western Christian denominations. But actually, this is funny, because the Bible was never really the cultural history of the Westerners, but of the Ethiopians in the first place, of the blacks. So it was never the choice of the Westerners, nor is it in their authority to choose or decide what is valid or not biblically. Nonetheless, they criticized the content, language, and interpretations of the Ethiopian biblical texts. The Bible was further marginalized and excluded from mainstream discussions of biblical scholarship and religious studies in Europe, and was not given the same level of recognition or respect as the Bible used by Western Christian denominations. Another reason for banning the Ethiopian Bible is due to Europeans' desire to control and dominate the Ethiopian territory. The European colonizers, particularly the Portuguese, sought to exert control and domination over the Ethiopian people. By banning the Ethiopian Bible, they aimed to suppress the indigenous culture and traditions of the Ethiopian people and impose their own cultural and religious practices. They viewed the Ethiopian Bible as a symbol of resistance to their authority and saw it as a threat to their efforts to convert Africans to Christianity and impose their own cultural and religious beliefs. The clamor for the Ethiopian Bible's ban was an attempt to undermine Ethiopians' traditional teachings and customs. This was done through missionary activities and the establishment of European-controlled churches and schools, which aimed at promoting European values and ideologies over those of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Hence, banning the Ethiopian Bible was a way to assert control over the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and its followers. Furthermore, missionary activities also necessitated the banning of the Ethiopian Bible. European missionaries viewed the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as a rival to their own efforts to convert the Ethiopian population to Christianity. The missionaries, particularly those from the Roman Catholic and Protestant traditions, viewed the Ethiopian Bible with suspicion and strove to suppress its use among Ethiopian Christians. They believed that the inclusion of apocryphal texts in the Ethiopian Bible was heretical and sought to impose their own versions of the Bible on the Ethiopian Christian community. In addition to the reasons, the Ethiopian Bible banning was also influenced by political power dynamics in Ethiopia. European powers, particularly during the colonial period, sought to exert influence over Ethiopia and its religious institutions in order to further their own political and economic interests. The tactic used by Europeans was to support rival factions within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in order to create division and weaken the church's authority. This was often done by backing certain bishops or clergy members who were more sympathetic to European interests and undermining those who were seen as more resistant to outside influence. Furthermore, European powers desired the control of key positions within the Ethiopian government and exert pressure on the ruling monarch in order to gain leverage over the church. By manipulating political power dynamics in this way, Europeans were able to weaken the church's autonomy and influence. We can summarily say that the banning of the Ethiopian Bible was as a result of the influence and power of European missionaries in Ethiopia, who sought to impose their own religious beliefs and practices on the Ethiopian Christian community. This led to the marginalization and suppression of the Ethiopian Bible, which continues to be a source of controversy and debate among scholars and theologians. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, European missionaries and scholars lobbied for the banning of the Ethiopian Bible, arguing that it was heretical and should not be circulated among Christian communities. They actively worked to ban the Ethiopian Bible and replace it with their own translations of the Bible. They pressured Ethiopian rulers and church leaders to adopt their versions of the Bible and to suppress the use of the Ethiopian Bible. This pressure eventually led to the Ethiopian Bible being banned by the Catholic Church in the early 20th century. Banning of the Ethiopian Bible was a way to undermine the authority of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and promote European missionaries' own brand of Christianity. The books of the Ethiopian Bible that were banned are known as the apocryphal or deuterocanonical books. These books include the books of Enoch, Jubilees, Tobit, Judith, Baruch, Sirach, Wisdom, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and many others. The book of Enoch is attributed to the biblical figure Enoch, who was taken up to heaven. The book contains unique material on the origins of demons and Nephilim, why some angels fell from heaven, an explanation of why the Genesis flood was morally necessary, and a prophetic exposition of the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah. Jubilees, which is also known as the Book of Jubilees, is a book retelling the biblical history from creation to the giving of the law at Mount Sinai, with a focus on the importance of observing the Sabbath and other religious practices. Tobit tells the story of Tobit, a righteous man who is blinded and experiences various trials and tribulations, but is ultimately rewarded for his faithfulness. Judith, on the other hand, tells the story of a brave Jewish widow named Judith, who saves her people from the invading Assyrian army by seducing and beheading their general, Holofernes. The book of Baruch is attributed to Baruch, a scribe and companion of the prophet Jeremiah, and contains prayers and reflections on the exile of the Jewish people. Sirach, which is also known as Ecclesiasticus, is a collection of wisdom sayings and advice for living a righteous life. The Book of Wisdom, also known as the Wisdom of Solomon, shares a philosophical reflection on the nature of wisdom and the importance of living a virtuous life. And finally, books of the Maccabees recount the history of the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire and the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem, with events that are celebrated during the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. These books were banned by some branches of Christianity because they were not included in the Hebrew Bible and were considered non-canonical. However, they are still considered sacred and authoritative by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. In conclusion, the banning of the Ethiopian Bible is a complex and multifaceted issue that raises important questions about the intersection of religion, politics, and cultural heritage. The decision to ban this sacred text reflects a long history of colonialism, imperialism, and religious intolerance that has been on for as long as anyone can remember and sought to suppress and control the beliefs and practices of marginalized communities. The Ethiopian Bible, with its unique blend of Christian and Jewish traditions, represents a rich and diverse cultural heritage that has been preserved and passed down through generations. By banning this text, authorities are not only silencing the voices of Ethiopian Christians, but also erasing a vital part of their history and identity. Ultimately, the banning of the Ethiopian Bible calls for a re-evaluation of the ways in which power and privilege shape our understanding of history and shape our interactions with others. It is a call to action to stand in solidarity with those whose voices have been silenced and to work towards a more inclusive and equitable world where all beliefs and traditions are respected and celebrated. That brings us to the end of yet another interesting video segment. Do endeavor to kindly reach us through the comment section where you can drop your thoughts, and we would be delighted to pick from them. Support our work also by hitting that like button in front of you. Share with your friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative. And kindly subscribe to stay with us for more, whilst you also keep the channel growing. We are glad to have you. Thank you for watching.